Okay, so first thing I'd like to do is just set the scene around Capito, and then hand over to Peter and Ian. So Capito, Scottish-based IT reseller. We've been around for a number of years. You probably have heard of us or have dealt with us in the past, and obviously I've been around in the IT industry for about 15 years now. We do, like most resellers, we operate across a wide portfolio of products. Today we're going to be focused around a particular area of virtualization and how Liquidware can enable that. Capito have a wide range of capabilities that we address to our clients, and as mentioned, we pretty much cover anything at all that touches a desktop or data center. Today, however, we're going to focus on one key area, which is virtualization, VMware, Citrix. We'll also cover some aspects of Office 365 and cloud. And as I said, today's objective is to give you a high-level overview of the Liquidware portfolio and how IT staff can use the Liquidware portfolio to enable, fast-track and give you an insight into your existing desktop environment, allow you to manage and monitor and ultimately make your job easier. So hopefully by the end of the presentation you'll have a clearer understanding of where Liquidware can add value to your current challenges. So I'll just hand over to Peter, who can give you a bit of a background on Liquidware before we go into the presentation.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Derek, and thank you for the opportunity to work with you guys on this WebEx, and good morning to all those attending. As I said, my name's Peter. I'm from Liquidware, and for those that haven't heard Liquidware and who we are, so we've been around. We were founded in 2009. You may have heard us previously as Liquidware Labs, and we went through a rebranding exercise because we're not labs anymore. You know, this whole EUC virtualization around the desktop piece isn't really experimental anymore. It's standard, really, if you like. So Liquidware was founded by some industry veterans in this market, guys that had really understood the EUC space, the virtualization space with VMware and Citrix and others. And back when this was kind of starting out, if you like, people had real issues with delivering VDI projects, and it's around, it's a different mindset. You're now in the virtualization world, but working with desktops. And it was understanding what you have in that desktop environment and how to bring that into a virtualization infrastructure, and then how to deliver all the usual Windows things around profiles and applications, because typically in an end user computing environment, your desktop isn't real because it's virtual, but it's also built on demand as you log in, i.e. a non-persistent desktop. So you can save on infrastructure costs and licensing costs. And that means, how do you build this desktop and bring all of those components and elements that make up the desktop, the operating system, the applications and the user experience, and bring all of those things together and deliver that overall user experience. So just click the next slide, Derek. So in order to deliver this, we have three key solutions. We're not going to talk too much in terms of a technical, in-depth discussion. We can do that offline and via the guys at Capito. But just to give you an idea, we're talking about a product called ProfileUnity, FlexApp, and Stratusphere. We're the first to market with this fully robust WEM suite, and that's Windows Environment Management. And we're the only third-party kind of agnostic tool, if you like, that sits outside and works with any platform. So we're not locked into Citrix or VMware or anything like that. It works across everything. And when we say everything, it is literally anything physical, anything virtual, anything in the cloud, whatever it might be. If it's running a Windows operating system, then we can help manage and deploy that. Next slide. So one thing that we kind of talk about, we don't kind of really talk about products per se. Obviously we have products because something has to deliver this, but it's more about kind of a project and a life cycle, and I hate to use the word journey again, but it is exactly that. And what Liquidware can deliver is this complete onboarding and desktop lifecycle management or user lifecycle management. So if you're thinking about a project and where do I start, the typical questions in there is what have I got currently and what do I want to achieve, i.e. where do I want to go? So it's all about planning in that phase, checking out my infrastructure, what I've got, who's doing what device, where, how, and all those questions. So when you get that, then you want to actually do something, i.e. onboard them. So now I take that information and do something with it. So I'm going to migrate, I'm going to pick up users and take them to, maybe it's a new operating system, maybe I'm going from physical to virtual, maybe to a cloud-based solution, or it might just be some applications that you need to deploy that don't typically deploy well in your current environment. And then at the end, okay, I've planned, I've onboarded. How do I know that it's actually working? Are the users getting what I expected them to get, and are they happy with it? So managing and troubleshooting that whole kind of user experience. And the whole point here is putting the user first. It's great, it can deploy infrastructure, lots of flashy lights, lots of IOPS, lots of this, that, and the other back in your data center. But at the end of the day, it's all about that one user or groups of users that hit the keyboard, log in, and what experience do they get? And that experience has to be spot on. Otherwise, this whole project thing is kind of out the window. So if we go to the next slide, I'm just literally going to introduce you to the products because we're going to talk about these and put them into a context of a scenario. So just so you know what they are. So ProfileUnity is Liquidware's user environment management solution. It's for delivering advanced profile management, centralizing policy, privilege elevation, and application rights management. It's managing the user experience from a profile element. If we go to the next slide and we talk about our application delivery technology or application layering, that's called FlexApp, and that gives you the ability to layer in applications on demand for the user as they log in. And then finally, last but by no means least, is the Stratusphere UX product. And that puts in 2 appearances, right at the beginning for assessments, and then right at the end again for the monitoring and the diagnostics. And the reason it does both things is because you can baseline from your assessment and actually monitor and measure what it used to be like and what it's like now. It's kind of like the Weight Watchers before and after. So when somebody says, can you actually show me what's improved? You can say, well, here's the previous experience of login was 10 minutes and now login is 30 seconds and here's how that has happened. So I can actually demonstrate that for you. So if we go into the next slide, what we're going to do is rather than do the traditional vendor product pitch, I'm going to tell a story, and it's the story of this desktop administrator's crusade to modernize and manage his desktop environment. So if we go to the next slide, I'm going to introduce you to my friend who's kind of called Virtual Fred. He's actually called Ian, but we're going to call him Fred for today. So sorry, Fred, Ian. So you've got a number of challenges. What keeps you awake at night?
Yeah, so hi everybody. My name's Fred for this. We've got a project, so an ongoing project, so a desktop modernization, transformation, whatever you want to. And I need to update all the environments. So I've got a lot of issues. I've got old operating systems, so I need to migrate from things like Windows XP. We're trying to work out how to speed our login times up. We've got physical environments, we've got virtual. We don't know whether we want to go to a VDI or stay with physical. Because we don't know whether the applications are going to work. So we've just got this whole issue, along with also, you get the usual issues of your users of saying, exactly as you said before, it's taking me 10 minutes to log in. We need to break that down. Or this application, I need this, how can I get it delivered a lot more easily? So these are just some of the challenges that we're facing with this migration project. So can I have the next slide, please? So really, it starts off with what does the environment look like today? So if we can click slide. It's a little bit like playing Guess Who. I mean, yes, I know all my users, but do I know what they're doing? Exactly what they're doing, where they're logging in from, what machines they're logging on to, what security groups they're in, and what are they doing? And how is the environment treating them at the moment? Next slide. But on top of that, it's the applications. I mean, yes, when I go out and ask my users, what applications do you need? They'll say, well, we need it all. Just because they might use it once in a blue moon, they might think, oh, maybe I need Visio one day. Maybe it's not part of my job, but I'd just like to have it, because a lot of the time that's what users are like. They want everything they can get their hands on, whether they're going to use it or not. But that, of course, gives me issues with things like licenses. Because if I've got 5,000 users all saying they want Visio, I need 5,000 licenses of Visio, just as an example. So it's very much it's guesswork and reliant on what the users are telling me, and typically users are, well, my users anyway, are unreliable on that side. So if we can have the next slide, please. So really what I need to do first is find out all that information before I can even look at doing this transformation. So what I decided to do was actually go out and have a look for some monitoring tools, some assessment tools, whatever you want to think of it as. So I decided to go onto Google, and because I want to know about everything that I've got, I want to know about all my Stratusphere, the whole environment, I typed it into Google. But unfortunately, me being me, I spelt it wrong. But luckily for me, I've come up with, or it's come back with, good old Google, this Stratusphere UX product by Liquidware. So obviously I've got in touch with those guys, explained all of this that we're trying to do. So, Mr. Liquidware, how can you help me? Can you?
Absolutely, we can help you, and I'm glad you can't type properly. That's helped us, but it's not a spelling mistake. So Stratusphere is where you would be starting your project, and this would be from an assessment and user experience baseline. So finding out what you've got out there and who's doing what. So if we take a look at the next slide, we can see some of the information that you'll actually get from your environment. I mean, this is just a very, very small snippet of the things you can achieve. But basically what we're looking at is capturing metrics from the devices that are out there currently. And these don't have to be physical, it could be virtual, it could be the fact that you've already deployed a cloud-type desktop environment or Citrix or VMware, and it's not quite what you expected, or it's not quite delivering for the users. But typically, we start on that whole physical side, and that includes servers as well. If you're already using say a Zen app or something a little bit older than Zen app, that to go in there and actually assess how many machines you've got, how many users have you got, what are they using, and when are they using it, so we can tell you the times when these users used it. And from the licensing perspective, I heard you mention the fact that you don't know what people are using. Well, I could tell you that maybe you have 100 copies of Visio, but only 10 people have ever used it. Maybe you could reduce your licensing count there. There's an example right there as a cost saving. But without a tool like this, would you know that? And would you just put Visio on every desktop because somebody might need it? I think you mentioned they might need it once in a blue moon, so therefore they get it. But what's that once in a blue moon license cost do to your organisation? Unnecessary costs, I would think. But I can see here, what machines I've got, the age of those machines. I can baseline the whole experience and then actually tell you whether or not you're a good fit for whatever it is you're doing, whether that's VDI, moving to the cloud, moving to a new operating system. And we'll talk about that in a bit as well, and help you design what this new infrastructure is. It may well be that you're going to physical, and you need to know that your physical desktop PCs will actually run the latest version of Windows 10 because you're on XP or 7 today. And based on those recommendations and requirements, we could tell you what you need to do and where you need to do it to make that work. And just give you that overall experience of today from inventories and all that stuff. But basically, I can tell you everything you need to know about your environment and probably a lot more to help you make some informed choices and decisions around where you go next. So if we go to the next slide, how does that help you? How does that fit in? What's that given you?
Well, that's excellent, because that's now given me a high or even a low level, depending on how much you want to drill down into it, overview of the applications that I've got, the operating system. So it's now started to give me an idea of the cost that the infrastructure's going to need, because I'm going to need to upgrade potentially a lot of desktops or whatever, because as you say, they might not be physically able to run Windows 10. So it started to drill down into the costs for that, which then brings me on to, well, do I do that, or do I look at VDI? Because that's potentially something that we may do. In which case, obviously, I could utilize the old hardware, buy new server-based hardware, and reutilize it that way. But from what I can see within the product, it means now that I've got a good idea about VDI. So being able to look at some of the reports and things that are in there, does it fit? What am I going to need? What scale am I going to need? How will it all work? So it's all given me that baseline and idea of how to move forward.
Excellent.
Okay, if we have the next slide. So, okay, it's given me that good idea of VDI, and chances are, looking at it, and obviously based on where we are at the moment, that may well be the way to go. But of course, VDI brings its own challenges and its own questions. It's like, how do I put my applications out onto VDI? How do I get stuff from their old OS, so their profiles? Because users are quite often very touchy about the stuff that they have on their desktops and their pictures of their children and these sorts of things, or their own files on there. How do I get that over onto either a VDI or even just say a newer sort of Windows 10 environment? But also, one specific challenge, which I didn't mention earlier, is the reason a lot of people have got sort of laptops or their own desktops, because we've got a few developers and they need to install their own applications. So that's another challenge, and I'm not sure whether they'd still be able to do that inside a VDI environment. So can you help me on that side of it?
Yeah, no, certainly we can. So if we start to look at the next solution, which is our ProfileUnity, our user environment management solution, and we think of this as exactly that. It's not just profile management. It goes way beyond profile management. So one of the key important things just to point out, if we go to the next slide, is this whole profile thing. And one of the things that ProfileUnity does is it essentially centralizes your profiles into a standard infrastructure on a file share, not in any kind of unique format, and it kind of acts as a translator is probably the best way to describe it. And that once I've got that profile centralized via the portability within the solution, is I can actually roam between operating systems. And it doesn't matter if that operating system is on a virtual machine, as a hosted, or in the cloud. It really doesn't matter. And one thing to point out, and this is an interesting thing, there's actually a couple of things missing to add to this slide. Each time Microsoft releases a new version of Windows, they change the profile version. And when I said a couple of things are missing, actually there are now 4 versions of Windows 10. So that means actually you could be migrating from Windows 10 to Windows 10. That may sound like a completely crazy thing, but what they've done is they've changed where the profile is living. So in some versions it's lived as a set of registry keys, in some versions it's lived in a database, in other versions it's lived in both. And ProfileUnity has the ability to know which operating system you're moving to and from and deliver the profile in the correct way. So one thing you mentioned, Fred, is that you've got 5,000 users. I'm assuming you're not going to do that in one big bang approach, are you?
No.
And if you upgrade from one OS, typically maybe one of your branch offices is going to go to Windows 10 today, but another one's still going to be on Windows 7. Does that mean somebody from a Windows 10 environment goes to the other place and can't log on because they're now using Windows 7? Not at all, not with ProfileUnity involved. we can manage that whole profile management piece. So you also mentioned there about installing your own applications as well. Absolutely. So applications right management is a big part of what ProfileUnity can do as well, just to pick on that particular use case that you have there. So I can actually, give particular users, in this case it's your development team, I can give them effectively local admin rights, because typically everyone gives everybody local admin rights to install. Yeah, maybe not a good idea. So that allows them, for certain applications that you choose, whether they can or cannot install something on that desktop. So you're now managing who does that. So in your case, it would just be the development guys there. And that's just one of the features. Absolutely. And when you start moving to things like non-persistent VDI, then I can just kind of deliver those things back in, particularly with the profiles. I can roam around. I can deliver my profile to any virtual desktop wherever you choose to log in, even if you get a clean machine, because you are non-persistent every time. So if we look at some of the other use cases on the next slide, I've just picked out probably kind of the top 10 based on some of the things we've been talking about. And as you can see, applications rights management is there, but it's the coexist between Windows operating systems. The other big thing, and I don't know, I don't want to throw spanners into your works, Fred, but Office 365. And how do I deal with that in a non-persistent environment with caching and indexing? Again, something that ProfileUnity can deal with using things like Profile Disk and what we call Profile Bridge, that I can actually cache and index your Outlook files on a virtual hard drive that just gets attached at the time of login. So I don't sit there for days and days while gigs and gigs of mailboxes get synchronized with the desktop, only for you to log out 5 minutes later and it's all gone again. I can actually speed up the login process and deliver that that type of solution. Obviously, I can lower costs. We've got roaming profiles, deliver context-aware desktop, so you get the right thing based on who you are, where you're logging in from, and what you're allowed to do effectively. So in your example, again, your developers can install their own apps. The guys in the marketing team cannot. But and then build on that as to, okay, if you're out of the office and you're coming in on a different network, you can't have access to this particular set of applications. Or I know you've just logged in from the office down the road, so there's no point me mapping drives and printers that are somewhere completely different. And it brings all of that into one central management console. Everything is done in one single management console.
So for me,
does that help your?
Yeah. I was just going to say. So for me, that looks like it just simplifies the management of my users. So their profiles. I'm glad you brought up the Office 365 because that is something that a lot of people here are thinking about. Yeah. I'd heard some rumours, should we say, that it was a little bit more difficult on VDI. But that could simplify stuff a lot, especially obviously with the cached modes and these sorts of things.
Yeah, absolutely.
That makes that a lot simpler. So obviously that's all to do with your users and sort of their environment, if you want to call it that way, so their profile. So can we go on to the next slide, please? So obviously...
Before I do that, we've got a question come through that I'd like to throw out to Peter. Peter, with ProfileUnity, can you tell if it's being streamed with AppV?
Sorry, I didn't quite hear you, Derek.
Sorry, can ProfileUnity tell if an app's been streamed with AppV?
Yes, we can. There is. If I showed you a picture of the console now, you'll see an AppV icon in there, so you can actually deliver AppV packages and ThinApp as well, by the way, from VMware. You can actually deliver those if you've already got them built. You can deliver those, put the context around them.
Excellent. Okay, I'll move on to the next slide.
We're happy to do a demo, but I'll just add, if anybody wants to see some of this in action, then, if you have a chat with Derek afterwards, we're more than happy to jump on and actually show you some of this stuff. I don't think potentially we'll have time to do a demo today, but we can certainly show you some of these features. Sorry, Fred, I interrupted you.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Peter.
There you are.
That's that. That's okay. So obviously that's the profile taken care of. I now, thanks to Stratusphere UX, I know what applications I've got out there, but how do I put the applications onto the user's desktops?
Okay, no, that's a very valid and very important question. So if we go to the next slide, what we're talking about now is actually a part of, or an integrated part of ProfileUnity, and that's the FlexApp product that we mentioned earlier, which is all around application layering. So if we look at the next slide, then basically what we're talking about is delivering applications as layers. So they're not natively installed onto the VDI session or onto the desktop. They're actually installed onto a virtual hard drive. And if we just go back to that previous question, if you've got really, really good eyesight, you'll see the AppV icon on the console picture there. But you do have to have really good eyesight. But if we go back to the FlexApp, what I can do is say capture an application. I can capture that as a layer on a virtual hard drive, and I attach that hard drive to the session, to the virtual machine as I log on. And that basically means that I can now take those applications and deliver them in a non-persistent way. So I log on, we've seen that my profile gets delivered, but also now I can deliver the application. So I'm just going to literally plug in like a bunch of hard drives and the application is going to appear. And that application appears as if it's natively installed. So the other question we typically get asked is how does this work? So if we look at the architecture on the next slide, we'll just kind of give you a bit of a high-level overview of how this works. So the example here we've got is an operating system which is built up of a file system, a registry, and then we see these two things called filter drivers. That's actually FlexApp working. And then we have an application on the left-hand side. I've got Word, and Word will have its own file system and registry settings, as will PowerPoint. So if we start one at the first transition, if we just click there, Derek, what we're doing is App A, take that as a virtual hard drive with all of the files that need to run Word contained within that virtual hard drive. When I attach that to my operating system, and via the magic within the FlexApp filter driver, I'm going to insert the file system and registry keys for Word into the operating system, and then keep track of them. And now Word appears as if it's natively installed. And if I were to log out, the whole process would be reversed. So everything that related to Word would be removed. So if you then to look at the operating system, it just looked like a clean OS. And if we click the next transition, then we'll see that PowerPoint does exactly the same. There we go. So I attach my PowerPoint hard drive, and then I'm going to layer in, hence where the terminology layering comes from. I'm going to layer those registry keys and file system settings into the base OS. Now there is one clever thing in there, that if we get conflicts, that FlexApp can deal with conflicts. So if there's already a same registry key or file system setting that's already in there, like a shared DLL, for example, then FlexApp will deal with that. It'll do an about turn and point the application back at the DLL file that was captured at the time you built the actual layer itself. So if you kind of put all that together in the next slide, as how these things work together to bring together one solution. So here's Windows 10, and there's Fred again, and here's my Windows drive. So the first thing, if we click on the first transition there, Derek, we install Liquidware. We put the wrong logo in there, but never mind. If we click again for the next transition, the user then connects to their Windows 10. If you just keep going through them, Derek, and let them build out. So because we've got ProfileUnity managing the user's profile, so all their settings are going to come with them. So there's their folders, their profile, their Outlook, if they're running the Office 365, printers, their FlexApp. So now FlexApp kicks in, and in come my applications. And then ultimately what I would get there is there's my Windows 10 session. And the key thing there is it's my Windows 10 session, i.e. it's everything that I know about me, it's my printers, my documents, it's my personal Windows that I've customized, and all of my applications have been layered in. So if that was a session or a non-persistent VDI, that started as just a completely blank vanilla Windows OS that you can manage. So if you are looking at VDI, then getting down to that nirvana of one gold image is absolutely achievable, because now I can manage on the left-hand side here all the user aspects of that session, and on the right-hand side there with FlexApp, I can manage all the application. So to go back to your question, Fred, about, well, how do I bring all the applications in there? This is how you would bring all of that together, and the two products working absolutely tightly integrated. And that's a unique feature for Liquidware, to have the application layering technology completely integrated into the profile management, because why wouldn't you? You need to put the context around when the user gets that app, why, how that's delivered. So if we just go on to the next slide and just look at those kind of top 10 use cases. So, seamless integration, we've talked about that. We can layer applications by group or department. So the marketing guys get these. So from our UX reports that say who gets all these licenses, well, maybe this app is only used by the marketing guys, but everybody gets it just in case. Well, now actually I can make sure just the marketing guys get it, and therefore I don't need to buy quite so many licenses. If you're using something like a Citrix Zen app or a Zen desktop, or a Vue hosted apps, or Horizon hosted apps, then we can actually allow you to build that farm and scale that farm, because basically the farm has now become non-persistent. So I can scale it. There's no silos of applications, and I can isolate sessions between users. So if I'm doing desktop sessions, for example, I can have a profile disk for each one of my users that's attached there. So they all get their own unique session and their own unique set of applications, even though they're running on a session-based delivery methodology. Works with DR, and again, it's one central management console for managing everything about the user. It's not just profiles, it's applications now we've added into there. So Fred, how does that work for your environment? We go to the next slide.
That's going to make my life so much simpler, to be honest. I mean, as we go forward, I can see how we can sort of get about 90% of our users up onto VDI. Obviously, that still leaves the other people that need specific desktops for whatever reason, or laptops. I mean, as I said, we've got some of the developers, they might need just a higher-end desktop, but it means that I can manage it all on the latest OSs from one console and one set of apps across all those different platforms, which is great. It's going to make my life and the IT department's life so much simpler and easier to look after. But my next question is then, what about going forward? So obviously, everything we've talked about is building that environment. What I need to do now is to be able to prove to management that that investment worked.
Yep.
So yes, the money that we've spent on that project was worth putting in there. But also, what about managing, well, not managing my users, but monitoring them, making sure that they're getting the right end user experience, but also when they get problems. So if usual one, users phoning up and saying it's slow for me to log in.
Yep.
Is there anything that you can do to help sort of ongoing maintenance and monitoring of that?
Absolutely, and that's a really good question and a really valid point, particularly when you're deploying something like this. So if we go to the next slide, we're back to our friend Stratusphere UX. So Stratusphere UX started the project, and if you remember, we did this baseline of Fred's environment as to what he's got now, what he's dealing with, so he can go and make those decisions. And as he's just described, he now needs to find out, have I done that? Have I achieved what I set out to achieve? Are management going to be happy? And it's ultimately the user's going to be happy. Now, we live in an ideal world, they'll all be happy, but things go wrong. But it's how do I pick those up quickly and fix them that doesn't affect them in any great way. So if we go to the next slide, and we talk a little bit more about Stratusphere UX in a monitoring capacity now, what it's going to give you is this ongoing proactive monitoring. So it's going to tell me the user experience on a daily basis, on an hourly basis, go down to a minutely basis if you really want to, if there's a particular issue. And hopefully with the analysis that we're doing is tell you something that's going to happen before the user picks up the phone and says, I can't log in. But typically, and I can't speak to all users, but you'll get the user phone the help desk and go, my desktop is slow. ... Fill in the blanks. Where do you start? What does slow mean? Did it take ages to log in? Is it just doing something in an application that's really slow? What does slow mean? And I'd often, the users, bless them, can't really explain it. Well, that's quite simple. You just pop onto the Stratusphere console. You can search by their username. You can search by their machine name, and you can quickly identify their machine, their session, or which machines they've logged into. Because often they might go and log into another machine and say it's slow. It's like, okay, there's something with the user there, or maybe it's changed on a different machine, but what? So I'll be able to see quite quickly, and if you can just kind of make out on the graphic at the bottom there's some red boxes and some green boxes and some yellow boxes. So it's the traditional red, amber, green. Red is what I'm looking for. So in this case, I could look there and go, actually, Mr. User, there's some disk I/O activity going on here. And that's what's out of scope and possibly causing you to slow down. But not only that, it's like, well, what's causing that disk activity? What is it? So we could trace that back and find at maybe 11 o'clock they launched something and it was some kind of scanning thing, or they did a search on their hard drive. We can see that level of detail. Or it might be something like we'll be able to spot that at the same time the disk I/O occurred, I can track at that specific point in time that also there's a lot of paging going on, which is driving high I/O. What drives paging? Well, that's memory. Oh, okay, you haven't got enough memory in that machine, or the application is consuming too much memory and became unresponsive. I can go to that level of detail, but also I can check back and say, well, did you have this in your previous environment? And if they didn't, then maybe there's some sizing things that weren't quite right when you move to a VDI environment. And we see that quite often, that you try and, with VDIs, is scale back on some of the resources, and often people scale back just a little too much, and it affects the user experience. But here I'm going to better tell you. And then also this what-if scenario is, I can work out what's going on. If I add this application, it's going to take up this much more resource. Do I need to up the spec of the machine? And this works across all platforms. It doesn't matter if it's physical, whether it's virtual, or if it's running in the cloud. It runs on all of those platforms. So if we just go to the next slide, I think that just kind of summarizes what we've just talked about. It's that before and after the transformation process, understanding that user experience beforehand, going and implementing your projects, and then coming back and checking that you have delivered what you said you have delivered. And just to give you a bit more detail, just to show you some of the stuff you get out, if you go to the next slide and we talk about the diagnostic drill down elements, this is just literally a screenshot from Stratusphere, and we talked about getting to that root cause immediately. So here I can see a whole bunch of users. I can see their user experience score. They've either got A's or B's, and I can quickly see what's going on, how long they took to log in, how much CPU they're using, even down to the GPU. I can see what exactly is going on in that session, that desktop, that VDI machine. And it's another help desk role. I can see all of this stuff going on and react. Because typically some of these things might not actually affect the user straight away, or they might not see it, but you can go in there and proactively say, oh, hold on a minute, there's some faults there, let me go in and fix those. And if you quickly look at the next slide as well, it's all about, and I've said it several times, it's all about putting the user first and this user first approach. And we want to define that experience, look what the users are doing, track them, where they're going, but also plot some of the trends. So we can see, actually, some of these users are starting to use more resource. What's happened there? Why are they using more resource? Have they installed something I don't know about, which is a shadow IT question? But easily looking at that and then producing these reports for management around KPIs on user experience, which is actually becoming more important now. And present them, in a traditional kind of block graph for the trending and analysis. And over time, I can say, this was this month, this was last month, that was 2 years ago, whatever. But also this Gartner type magic quadrant. We want all users in that top right corner. Anybody that falls out of there, and if you were on the console, I could click on those, and I could find out why they've dropped down into the bottom right quadrant. and actually work out what I need to do to go and fix that. So just to wrap up on kind of the UX and the monitoring thing, on the next slide, it's just again looking at those top use cases. It's the ability to support physical and virtual workloads in a single pane of glass. Yes, it's one management console that's highly scalable to tens of thousands of machines within an environment. Whether they're virtual, physical, Citrix, VMware, Amazon, don't really care. It's Windows that we care about. It's a Windows operating system, server and desktop. And hopefully, from your project, Fred, that's going to help you understand your environment going forward. And then, we're back into that whole lifecycle thing again. Times change, new operating system, new applications. Use UX to monitor that. Machines going end of life. We can track, if you've got a 5-year refresh cycle on a desktop, I can tell you when that 5 years is up. I could tell you the age of those machines, so you know that, okay, next month these 10 machines are going to need renewing and things like that. So how does that work for you, Fred?
That's excellent. I mean, it addresses the age-old question that we get time and time again on the help desk, or comment, shall I say, because generally there's not a lot you can do about it, of, when I tried to log in yesterday or last week or last night, it was really slow. It took 15 minutes to log in. And it's like, well, how do you diagnose that? Well, from what I can see here with this, I can just go back in and dig back in time and find out exactly what was happening at that point, and then be able to work on that. So, yeah, I mean, that seems almost too good to be true, shall we say. So that really leaves me with, I suppose, one question which I know the management are going to ask, and especially because I hadn't heard of you guys before, which is why I found you when I did that search. And it's a case of, okay, well, who's been using this? Is there somebody I can talk to? Have you got success stories? That sort of things, because the management are bound to ask me this.
No, absolutely. If we just go to the next slide, and it's we say to you, that the slide we just missed is keep calm, and we've got that covered. So we've worked with a company called Informa. I'm not going to read the slide out. People can have the slides and read those. But these guys had an existing environment and were wanting to move that to a cloud-based environment, but also move from Windows 7 and Windows 10. So build a new Windows 10 image and build up into the Amazon workspaces. So they started in exactly the story that we've just described. We start with Stratusphere. They looked at everything that's going on in their environment and were able to size that environment going forward, highlighting some of the things, because when you move into one of these environments, particularly in Amazon, it's price on a desktop. So if $30 a month is the basic, up to $100+ for a big desktop. So you go for the smaller ones. And quite quickly we realised that some of those small ones weren't actually right for the users, because we were hitting a lot of the performance metrics. They were all red. So how do we do that? So okay, that's a resizing exercise, but would you have known that beforehand? Possibly not, apart from the user going, this is slow. And then actually getting them through that, the migration process is picking up the profiles, centralizing them, and then allowing them to log in into their new environment with as little disruption as possible, because the profile's gone with them. So there's none of this having to set up new stuff. Where's my printer's gone? Where's this gone? Where's my that gone? It's all there ready for them. And then deliver the applications in exactly the same way as well. And then, as we just spoke about, deploy Stratusphere to actually keep that ongoing. What's happening is the user still getting that good experience. So absolutely, we've done this. We see that's about 10,000 desktops users. So absolutely, there are people you can talk to that have done that. I'll just add, there is actually a reference case for a customer in Scotland that's on our website that we, so something a bit more local to probably the guys on the call as well, around ProfileUnity. So I'll thank Fred for his questions there and wish him luck with his project. And at this point, we'll invite any questions, and I'll hand over to Derek at Capito to wrap up.
Okay, thanks very much, Peter. Thanks very much, Ian. Hopefully you found the presentation interesting and valuable. I know I did. I'd like to ask a question, Peter, before I hand over to the customers who've actually joined. You mentioned earlier, it was touched on Office 365.
Yes.
What particular advantage does the Liquidware portfolio bring to, especially a customer who is already got deployed VDI and now they're looking at introducing Office 365? How does Liquidware address some of the challenges that particular scenario would have?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So in a typical VDI environment, we've mentioned you want to aim for non-persistent, which means the desktop gets built on demand as a user logs in and all those user components get delivered. And Office 365 and Outlook particularly is one of those things. Now, depending on the size of your mailbox, what's going to happen is it's going to cache that locally on the VDI session, i.e. it's going to copy it, and then it's going to index it so you can actually search through your mailbox. That takes a long time, and the result for the end user will be a very slow login time. We've actually got some videos on our website that demonstrate this. Our CTO, Jason Mattox, did this with his live mailbox, brave man, and demonstrated the fact that he had, I don't know, gigabytes and gigabytes of mailbox. And when he logged on to a normal session, his login experience was awful. Outlook was unresponsive. He couldn't search email. It wasn't there. Then he demonstrated the ability to actually use the profile disk technology, which is effectively layering. So I'm putting all that Outlook cached files and indexed mailbox on a virtual hard drive that is already there. It's already done. All the indexing done. All I'm doing is plugging that into the operating system. The operating system thinks that's already there. That's part of me as an operating system, and therefore there's none of this long-winded copying and synchronizing. Although, okay, so I'll caveat that. The new stuff gets synchronized, not the whole mailbox and the whole indexing process. So we can send out the link in the slides probably, Derek, that shows that video, because immediately he's logged onto his VDI desktop, he's in his massive Outlook mailbox, and it's all indexed and ready to go. It just, the time taken is just, the comparison is phenomenal. That the mailbox is ready to go instantly. And you can use that cache feature, because otherwise you've got to go and use the web client and try and search through that. It's you maybe not got connectivity because you're at an airport, on a train, or just in the middle of London. You don't get internet connectivity often, and I've got my mailbox cached on my desktop. But that is a specific feature that we can drill down and provide you some more detail and videos on how that works.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Peter. So over to the attendees. Is there any questions from you that haven't been covered already? Okay, so looks like there's no additional questions. Excellent. So again, thanks very much, Peter, for your deep insight there. Again, just to reiterate, as Peter mentioned, Liquidware is a product that can be used across a wide variety of i.e. VMware, Citrix, Microsoft, physical, virtual, or cloud. So if you are planning to do any work in that area and you see that Liquidware can actually bring some value to the table, I will be in touch with you following today's webinar. Feel free to reach out